Okay, so now we're going to go through the breaking down and diagramming of arguments, which you did some work on, but I just want to go through some together. And if you haven't done them, this will help, though. Now we're giving you the answers, so. All right. So our first argument that we're going to diagram is I shouldn't go home this weekend, not only because I have too much studying to do, but also because I can't afford the trip. Okay, so we have two. Well, first we want to identify the conclusion in an argument, right? That's usually it's the best place to start typically, right? And I'm going to use the same color, red. So how are we going to find the conclusion? Well, we have two indicator words there, right? We have the becauses, and the because word means that the reason is going to follow, the premise is going to follow. So we know that the things coming after the because can't be our conclusion. So therefore, we know we want to figure out what are those because statements supporting. What because I can't afford the trip? What because I have too much studying to do? So I shouldn't go home this weekend, right? I shouldn't go home this weekend because I have too much studying to do. I shouldn't go home this weekend because I can't afford the trip, right? So that's going to be our last point when we're diagramming it. That's our conclusion. Why shouldn't I go home this weekend? Remember, we have those questions. Because I have too much studying, because I can't afford the trip. All right. So now let's look at what the premises are. We have two becauses, so we know that we have two premises, okay? At least two premises. I shouldn't go home this weekend. Conclusion, not only because, first reason, first premise, I have too much studying to do, but also because I can't afford the trip, second premise, okay? So now let's look at those premises and how they relate to each other. Are they independent of each other, or do they rely on each other? Do they need each other to make the conclusion true, or can they make the conclusion true on their own? Okay, so do we need just one of them for the conclusion to be true, or do we need both of them? So we can find out by asking a question about our conclusion. Why shouldn't I go home this weekend, right? It's our test question. Because I have too much studying to do. That's good enough, right? We have a conclusion and we have a premise. The premise, it gives us the reason, okay? Because I can't afford the trip. That's enough reason on its own to say that I shouldn't go home. Either one of them is a reason to not go home, and they don't need each other. We don't need to have too much studying to do and no money to not think it's a good idea to go home. Either one on its own is a reason to not go home, okay? So each premise in this case is sufficient to support our conclusion. So then we want to write out our list, right? I have too much studying to do. It's our first reason. I can't afford the trip. That's our second reason. And then our conclusion from 1 and 2 separately. So our 3, 1 can bring us to 3, or 2 can bring us to 3 on their own, okay? And then we take that and we want to make our diagram. So we have our 1 circle for our premise, I have too much studying to do. We have our 2 circle, I can't afford the trip. And then we have our conclusion, which I make a little square, rounded square for conclusions, okay? So then how do they connect? 1, I have too much studying to do, goes right to the conclusion. That's a reason why I shouldn't go home. And 2, I can't afford the trip, goes right to the conclusion. That's why I shouldn't go home. So an argument can have as many premises supporting its conclusion as it needs. But if each one is separate, so we could have 5 little circles there and they could each have an arrow pointing to our conclusion if each one of those was a reason to not go home on its own. So if also I'm sick, we could make that another bubble, and that would go right to the conclusion. And we could say because I have no way to get there, that would be another one. They would go right to the conclusion. So we want to make sure that when we diagram these, if it's an independent one, if they're separate, they have an arrow or a line going right to the conclusion on their own, okay? All right. Our next example, cheating on schoolwork is wrong because it means relying on someone else's knowledge, whereas the purpose of education is to learn to I'm sorry, that's a typo, is to learn how to rely on your own knowledge. So first we want to identify that conclusion, right? We have that because, so what's before the because, right? It indicates us that whatever's going to follow it is going to be a reason, so we want to look before the because to see what our conclusion probably is. Cheating on schoolwork is wrong. That's that's the conclusion that the rest of the statement is trying to prove. So that'll be our last point again. It's going to be our red square, okay? All right, so now let's look at what the premises are. We want to look after the because at each independent thought. Remember, we don't want to combine more than one piece of information into a premise. Sometimes that means we have to break things down into little tiny sentences. All right, so we have our conclusion, cheating on schoolwork is wrong, our keyword, because, and then our first premise in blue, it means relying on someone else's knowledge. Okay, and then we have our second one, it's another piece of information. The purpose of education is to learn how to rely on your own knowledge. So those are the two pieces of information that follow our because. Okay, so now we want to look at those premises and see how they're related. Are they independent of each other, or do they rely on each other? Do they need each other? So in other words, can we reach our conclusion with just one of them, or do we need both of them? So we find out by asking our question about our conclusion. Why is cheating on schoolwork wrong? It means relying on someone else's knowledge. Okay, but relying on relying on someone else's knowledge isn't wrong in and of itself. There's nothing wrong with relying on someone else's knowledge in some circumstances. It's like we rely on a doctor's knowledge of medicine when we're sick or we're hurt, or an attorney's knowledge of law when we need to go to court, or an IT guy's knowledge of our computer when it breaks and we need to bring it into fix. So relying on people's knowledge isn't wrong all the time. So why is it wrong? So how is it connected to our conclusion? It's not a reason in and of itself. So then we have because I can't afford. Oh, that's not supposed to be there. I'm sorry. That's just ignore that. I'll fix that when I post it. All right. So we need to establish why relying on someone else's knowledge is wrong in this particular circumstance. So we look at our other premise. The purpose of education is to learn how to rely on your own knowledge. So the premise establishes that the purpose of school is to use your own knowledge, and the first premise establishes that cheating is not using your own knowledge. Okay, so in this case, the premises work together to support our conclusion. If cheating is relying on someone else's knowledge, and at school you're supposed to rely on your own knowledge, that's why it's wrong. If you weren't supposed to rely on your own knowledge, then it wouldn't be wrong. Okay, so we need that second piece. So this is how, I didn't mean to leave that little lines there. Ignore those for right now. All right, so we're going to write out our list. Cheating means relying on someone else's knowledge. Premise 1. The purpose of education is to learn how to rely on your own knowledge. Premise 2. Cheating on schoolwork is wrong from 1 plus 2. Not 1 and 2 separately. 1 plus 2. Okay? So then we diagram our argument. We have our circle, our premise 1. Okay? We have our premise 2. And then we have our conclusion, and the premise 1 has a line going from it, and the premise 2 has a line going through it. But those lines meet and make one line to go to our conclusion, because we need both of them. It's the connection of them that makes our argument work. Okay, so each premise has a line, and they meet to create one line before the conclusion. This means that they means both together provide support, but they don't provide enough support on their own. So their arrows can't go directly to the conclusion. They need to be joined up, okay? Another way you can write it is you do the little blue circle, then a plus sign in the little green circle. Yours are obviously going to be color-coded, but and then you draw a line underneath it, kind of like an equation. Then you put your conclusion underneath it, and that. So everything on this line is together, okay? All right, so yeah, this is just an alternate way. And just as there can be any number of premises going directly to a conclusion, there can be more than one on that point. So we could have 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and have it all on a line, and then one line going down from the horizontal line to the conclusion, which would be 5. Okay. So yeah, that's not a good one to kind of make that up. But all right, so the last one we're going to go through Since my car won't start, I will have to take the bus. So I need to take exact change. So first we want to identify our conclusion. We have our keyword there, so. Okay, so is an indicator of a conclusion. Therefore, you can replace that so with therefore. Since my car won't start, I will have to take the bus. Therefore, I need to take exact change. Okay. All right. So works just like that. Whatever's after the so is a conclusion. So that means that our conclusion is I need to take exact change, right? So that's going to be our last point, right? So when we list our reasons, when we list our argument, I mean. So now let's look at what our premises are, by what information comes before our conclusion. What brings us to the so? We already talked about this before. Since can often work as an indicator word for the premise, but make sure that it can be replaced with because, okay? So since my car won't start, I will have to take the bus, so I need to take exact change. So my car won't start is going to be 1, and I will have to take the bus is going to be 2. Separate pieces of information, right? All right, so now let's look at these premises. We have to figure out how they're related so that we know how to list them and how to diagram them, okay? Are they independent? Do they need each other? What's going on with them? So we find out by asking the question about our conclusion. Why do I need to take exact change? We look at 1, because my car won't start. Well, all right, but those don't necessarily go together, right? Does my car not starting logically mean that I'll need exact change? No. I might need exact change for a vending machine, which has nothing to do with my car, right? Or if my car won't start, maybe I'm going to grab an Uber, in which case I wouldn't need exact change for anything. I just need the app on my phone. So those two don't necessarily, your car's not starting doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to need to take exact change. We're missing pieces in between, okay? So let's look at our other premise. I will have to take the bus. Why do I need exact change? Because I will have to take the bus. This progression does make sense, okay? Person needs exact change to take the bus. I don't know if that's true anymore, but it used to be. If I'm going to take the bus, I will need exact change. So the premise can go directly to the conclusion, but it doesn't give us all the information in the argument. And we can't just throw out pieces of an argument because we're lazy, or because we don't feel like it's important, or because we assume that people have it, okay? So we need to make sure that if we're given an argument, we take all of the premises and figure out how they fit together. We don't get to just throw them away, okay? We don't have 2 premises that each support the conclusion. You can't have my car won't start, go to the conclusion, and then I will have to take the bus, go to the conclusion. So that's not right. And our second premise is not dependent on the first conclusion. They don't both have to be true, because we just saw that I will have to take the bus could go directly to it. So one can go directly to it, but the other one can't, okay? So that means we have a third one, all right? A third type of diagram. So we write our list. 1, my car won't start. Oh gosh, it has the wrong thing at the top. I'm so sorry, guys. I will have to take the bus as our second one. I need to take exact change as our conclusion, okay? So this is an example of a chain argument. It's information that builds upon each other. My car won't start, so I'm going to have to take the bus, so I need exact change. I need to take exact change. Remember, we put it into question. Why? Because I'll have to take the bus. Why do I have to take the bus? Because my car won't start. Okay, so my first premise does not bring me to my conclusions, so we're going to need to look at that after. All right, so we make our list. Number 1, my car won't start. Number 2, I will have to take the bus. From 1. Why will I have to take the bus? Because my car won't start. And then 3, I need to take exact change because I have to take the bus, okay? So we have our 1, and it's going down. My car won't start. And then we have our conclusion. I need to take exact change. But there's something missing in the middle, right? We're missing information that we need to go to point 1 to point 3. So we diagram it like this. We draw our first bubble with an arrow to our second bubble, My car won't start, so our arrows kind of mean so. All right, so my car won't start, so I will have to take the bus. I'll have to take the bus, so I will need exact change. So they link up like that, okay? Our middle premise is like a sub-conclusion. First we go from 1 to 2, and then we go to 2 to 3. All right, 2 because of 1, then 3 because of 2. Oh, no, wait, we're not done. All right, so our 3 main diagram formulas when we have an argument, they may be all combined when we get to complex arguments, but with independent premises, so it's something that goes directly to the conclusion, but they're not related to each other. We have dependent premises where both of them need to be there together, and together they bring us to the conclusion. And then we have chained premises or sub-conclusions where one thing brings us to another thing that brings us to our final thing. Okay? I'm gonna, I'll fix the things that I typed wrong, and then I'll post this as a PDF on Google Classroom and Blackboard so that you guys can go back and refer kind of to these things. All right. So now let's go through the exercises that you had to diagram, which is exercise 4 in your book. Okay. All right. So you had to write the following arguments in standard form and show how the argument is structured using a diagram. Okay. So our first one, there's nothing wrong with prostitution because there's nothing wrong with consensual, sexual, and economic interactions between adults. Moreover, since there's no difference between a man who goes on a blind date with a woman, buys her dinner, and then has sex with her, and a man who simply pays a woman for sex, that is another reason why there is nothing wrong with prostitution. So let's go through this. First, we want to identify our conclusion always first. So that's the reason why is our indicator words there. Okay, so our conclusion is that there's nothing wrong with prostitution. So then we have to figure out what our other premises are. So our premise 1 is there's nothing wrong with prostitution because there's nothing wrong with the consensual, sexual, and economic interactions between adults. Okay, so basically the statement is saying there's nothing wrong if people consensual sexual things, and there's nothing wrong with consensual economic interactions. So that's our premise 1. Moreover, which means also, so in addition to that fact, our second premise, there is no difference between a man who goes on a blind date with a woman, buys her dinner, and then has sex with her, and a man who simply pays a woman for sex. Now, we don't have to agree with this argument. We're just diagramming it, okay? So that's the second premise. So we make our other bubble there. So we look at our conclusion. There's nothing wrong with prostitution, and we say, why is there nothing wrong with prostitution? Because there's nothing wrong with consensual, sexual, and economic relations between adults. Good on its own. It's a reason on its own. Then we look at the other one. Why is there nothing wrong with prostitution? Because there's no difference between a man paying directly for sex and a man taking a woman on a blind date and paying for it, and then having sex with her. And that's a reason on its own. So they're not dependent on each other, so they get their own little arrows going to the conclusion. Okay? All right, number 2. Prostitution is wrong because it involves women who have typically been sexually abused as children. We know that most of these women have been abused from multiple surveys done with women who have worked in prostitution and that show a high percentage of self-reported sexual abuse as children. You don't want to necessarily quote everything. You're going to want to take the words and make them make sense out of everything being connected. So we take our premise 1. Multiple surveys have been done with prostitutes show that a high percentage of them report being sexually abused as children. Because those surveys show that a high percentage of people who are prostitutes were sexually abused as children, we therefore know that prostitution involves women who are typically sexually abused as children. The survey shows us, 1 shows us that 2 exists, okay? And then from 2, we can get to therefore prostitution is wrong, okay? We have that because is our indicator word, so that's why we knew that the conclusion was there, all right? So this is a chain 1. We go from 1 because of the information in the surveys. We know this information of number 2, and because of number 2, we go to our conclusion number 3. Again, don't have to agree with it. We're just kind of diagramming them. All right, so here we're starting to get more complicated, okay? There was someone in this cabin recently because there was warm water in the tea kettle and because there was wood still smoldering in the fireplace. But the person couldn't have been Tim because Tim has been with me the whole time. Therefore, there must be someone else in the woods. Okay, so this one's obviously much more complicated. So we look at our premises. We have our first, we have a lot of becauses, and so that's how we know it's going to be chain linked, okay? So the first thing we do is we find our premises. There was someone in the cabin recently. Oh, sorry. First thing we want to do is find our conclusion. The therefore is going to indicate that this is our final conclusion, okay? Therefore, final conclusion. So our conclusion is there must be someone else in the woods, okay? So why must there be somebody else in the woods? Okay, that's the question we're trying to answer. So we got to prove that. So we look at all our premises. There was someone in this cabin recently. How do we know that there was someone in this cabin recently? I'm sorry, it's like hard to do it without using my mouse to point around. All right, let's just go through and list the premises. There was someone in this cabin recently. That's one information. There was warm water in the tea kettle. Separate piece of information. There was wood still smoldering in the fireplace. Another piece of information. The person couldn't have been Tim. Third information. Tim has been with me the whole time. Fifth information. Okay? So, there must be someone else in the woods. Why? Because the person in the woods couldn't have been Tim. Why? Well, Tim has been with me the whole time, and someone was in this cabin recently. So someone was in this cabin recently, and Tim's been with me the whole time, which means there must be someone else in the cabin because it wasn't Tim. Okay. Someone else in the cabin. How do you know that there was someone else in the cabin recently? Well, because there was warm water in the kettle and the fireplace is still smoldering. So you take 1 and 2, the warm water in the kettle and the fireplace smoldering. Together, they mean that someone was in this cabin recently. Okay. Then you have someone in this cabin recently, and you have that Tim was with me the whole time. Therefore, the person in the cabin couldn't have been Tim because Tim was with me. And then if the person in the cabin couldn't have been Tim, there must be someone else in the woods. Because it wasn't me and it wasn't Tim, therefore it has to be someone else. Okay? I know that one's really complicated, but I just want you to spend time kind of looking at how they're connected, okay? You need 1 and 2 to make 3. You need 3 and 4 to make 5. And 5 brings us to 6. All right. Number 4. It is possible to be blind and yet run in the Olympic Games, since Marla Runyan did it in the 2000 Sydney Olympics. Okay, first thing we want to do is find our conclusion. Since means that it's going to give us the explanation, so we know that everything before the since is going to be our conclusion. It is possible to be blind and yet run in the Olympic Games. That's our conclusion. Which means that our premise is Marla Runyan did it at the 2000 Sydney Olympics. But did it, like I said, that's too vague. Remember those vague words, we want to replace those. So what did she do? Marla Runyan ran while blind in the Olympic Games at the 2000 Sydney Olympics. And that's our premise. So we have proof, she did it, therefore it's possible because someone did it. Okay, it goes directly to premise to conclusion. But we want to replace the things like it and he and no one, things like that. We want to replace them with the specific words, okay? All right, number 5. The train was late because it had to take a longer alternate route since the bridge was out. Okay, we want to find our conclusion. Comes before the because and the since, right? So the train was late. That's our final conclusion. Why was the train late? The train was late because it had to take a longer and alternate route. Why did it have to take a longer and alternate route? Because the bridge was out. So we have that chain link, okay? The bridge was out, therefore the train was late. Does not make sense. But the train had to take a longer and alternate route does make sense that that's the conclusion. But that's not the whole story because we need to know why did the train have to do this. And so it goes 1 to 2 to 3. Okay. All right, we have another really complicated one here. All right. Israel is not safe if Iran gets nuclear missiles, since Iran has threatened multiple times to destroy Israel. And if Iran had nuclear missiles, it would be able to carry out this threat. Moreover, since Iran has been developing enriched uranium, they have the key component needed for nuclear weapons. Every other part of the process of building a nuclear weapon is simple compared to that. Therefore, Israel is not safe. So our therefore is nice and obvious for us there, so we know our conclusion. Therefore, Israel is not safe. Okay. So then we're going to why. Why is Israel not safe? Okay. So we want to start and look at all of these together. Okay. So it goes 1 and 2 are going to bring us to 3, and then 3, 4, and 5 all together make one line to bring us to 1. So we need all of these things to get to our conclusion. So let's just start and go through it one by one. So we have 1, Israel has threatened to destroy, Iran has threatened to destroy Israel multiple times. Therefore, if Iran had a nuclear missile, Israel is not safe. Well, no, because we don't know anything about a nuclear missile in number 1. And then we have 2, if Iran had a nuclear missile, it could destroy Israel. Okay, but that doesn't imply that it wouldn't be safe. Just because it could destroy it doesn't mean that they would destroy it. So then we add them together. Iran has threatened to destroy Israel several times. And if Iran has a nuclear missile, they could. Then we get to 3. If Iran had a nuclear missile, Israel is not safe because they've threatened to destroy it, and a nuclear missile could destroy it. So if both of those were true, then we would get to 3. So then we look at 4. Iran has been developing enriched uranium. Okay, and then we look at 5. Enriched uranium is the most difficult part of the process of building a nuclear weapon. Every other part is easy compared to that. So, if Iran's been developing the uranium, and the uranium is the hardest thing to get, and Israel's not safe if Iran has nuclear missiles, then if all 3 of those things are true, then Israel would not be safe. That was a little harder to kind of talk out, but just spend some time kind of looking at how it goes, okay? All right. Number 7. Since all professional hockey players are missing front teeth, and Martin is a professional hockey player, it follows that Martin is missing front teeth. And since almost all professional athletes who are missing their front teeth have false teeth, it follows that Martin probably has false teeth. So this one really kind of goes in order. We have it follows, it follows. So it's our last it follows that's going to be our conclusion. So Martin probably has false teeth is going to be our conclusion, okay? So we look at all of that. Let's look at our premises. All professional hockey players are missing front teeth. That's premise 1, okay? If all of them are missing them, remember it has the word all there, not some, all. Information 2, Martin is a professional hockey player. So it follows, if all hockey players are missing their front teeth, and Martin is a hockey player, then we can conclude from that when they're added together that Martin is missing his front teeth, right? All professional hockey players are missing their front teeth, going directly to it. So if we did premise 1 to 3, all professional hockey players are missing front teeth, therefore Martin is missing front teeth. Well, no, because it doesn't say anything about Martin being a hockey player. And if we go to 2, directly from 2 to 3, Martin is a professional hockey player, therefore Martin is missing front teeth. Well, no, what does him being a hockey player have to do with him missing his front teeth? When we add them together, hockey players are missing their front teeth, Martin is a hockey player, therefore Martin is missing his front teeth. Okay, so we get to 3 with 1 and 2 combined together. And then we look at our 4th and final premise. Almost all professional athletes who are missing their front teeth have false teeth. And when we combine those 2, we get to our conclusion. Because if we went from 3 to 5, Martin is missing his front teeth, therefore Martin probably has false teeth. Well, no, he might have false teeth, but there's nothing saying probably. And if we go from 4 to 5 on its own, almost all professional athletes who are missing their front teeth have false teeth. Martin probably has false teeth. Well, from 4 to 5, we don't know that Martin's missing his teeth or that he's a hockey player. We don't know anything about him. So when we put them together, Martin's missing his front teeth, which we already know he's a hockey player. And then we add 4 professional athletes who are missing their front teeth. Almost all of them have front teeth, have false teeth. Then we put them together and we can get that Martin probably has false teeth. We can't definitively say it because it doesn't say all professional athletes have false teeth, but it says almost all. So we have a probably there, a most likely, okay? I think that one's a little easier to understand. All right, 8. I know, we're almost done. Anyone who eats the crab rangoon at China food restaurant will probably have stomach troubles afterwards. It has happened to me every time, which is why it probably will happen to other people as well. Since Bob ate the crab rangoon at China food restaurant, he will probably have stomach troubles afterwards. I do not know why I did not highlight the conclusion in that one, but our conclusion, our final statement is that he will probably have stomach troubles afterwards, right? But who is he? We need to make sure we change that when we write it, Bob, because he's the one we're talking about. So Bob will probably have stomach troubles afterwards is going to be our conclusion. All right, so then we look at our other ones, okay? So number 1, it has happened to me every time. What has happened to you every time, right? So we need to be more specific when we write that out. Every time I have eaten crab rangoon at China City, I have had stomach troubles afterwards, okay? And then 1 goes, if every time I've done it, we can go to 2, that probably anyone else who eats there will have stomach troubles afterwards. If every time I've done something, I've gotten sick from it, then it's likely that when other people do that, they get sick from it too. So it goes 1 to 2, okay? We can't go from 1 to 4. Every time I've eaten crab rangoon at China food restaurant, I have had stomach troubles afterward. Therefore, Bob will probably have stomach troubles. Well, we have no evidence that Bob has even eaten there, okay? So we go from 1 to 2. So we have, we still, from 2 to 4, we have that same problem. We don't know that Bob's eaten there yet. Now, if we just went 3 to 4, Bob ate the crab rangoon at China food restaurant. Therefore, Bob will probably have stomach troubles afterwards. We haven't established that people often get sick from eating there, so it doesn't tell us our conclusion either. So, but when we add 2 and 3 together, that when people eat at this restaurant, they often get sick, and Bob ate at this restaurant, then we can get to the conclusion Bob will probably get sick. Okay? All right. Number 9. Albert and Caroline like to go for runs in the afternoon in Hyde Park. Since Albert never runs alone, we know that anytime Albert is running, Caroline is running too. But since Albert looks like he has just run, since he is panting hard, it follows that Caroline must have run too. This one's complicated somewhat with the order, okay? So our conclusion, which I think is actually cut off from your video, is that Carolyn has probably gone running too, okay? It's likely that Carolyn was running, is our conclusion, okay? Carolyn must have run too. All right, so then we want to look at our information that we have. Albert and Carolyn like to go for runs. Therefore, Carolyn must have run too. No, that's not going to work. Albert never runs alone. Therefore, Carolyn has probably run too. Well, no. We don't know that they even run together. Anytime Albert is running, so is Caroline. Okay, but we have the information that gets us there, right? So Albert and Carolyn like to run together, and Albert never runs without Carolyn. So those things together mean that anytime Albert's running, so is Caroline. Separately, not so much. Albert and Caroline like to run together. Therefore, anytime Albert is running, so is Caroline. No, just because you like to do something together doesn't mean you always do it. So we put that with Albert never runs without Caroline, and we can go, therefore, anytime Albert is running, so is Caroline. Why can't I go from 2 to 3? Albert never runs without Caroline, therefore, anytime Albert is running, so is Caroline. Well, we don't know. If Caroline doesn't like to run, then we know that Albert just may never run. Okay, so that sets up that they do run, and that he never runs without her, therefore, if he's running, she's running. Okay? Then we want to look at our other ones. So we have Albert looks like he just ran, since he's panting hard. So that since shows us that the he is panting hard is going to prove the thing before it. Okay? So Albert's panting hard, therefore, Albert looks like he's just run. Okay? Why does Albert look like he's just run? Because he's panting hard. Okay? So then we take 3 and 5 and we put them together. Therefore, anytime Albert is running, so is Caroline. Albert looks like he just ran, so therefore Caroline was probably running also, right? Because Albert probably ran. He doesn't run without Caroline, so if he went running, Caroline had to have gone running with him. All right. This is our last one. You guys have been troopers if you made it through this. All right. So, number 10. Just because Jeremy's prints were on the gun that killed Tim, and the gun was registered to Jeremy, it doesn't follow that Jeremy killed Tim. Since Jeremy's prints would certainly be on his own gun, and someone else could have stolen Jeremy's gun and used it to kill him. So, our conclusion is at the beginning, right? So, therefore, just because Jeremy's prints were on the gun that killed Tim and the gun was registered to Tim, it doesn't follow that Jeremy killed him. Well, why doesn't it follow? Well, because Jeremy's prints would be expected to be on his own gun. Well, that on its own doesn't say anything. Well, yes, they would, but that doesn't mean he didn't kill Tim. And number two, someone could have stolen Jeremy's gun and used it to kill Tim. Well, yes, but his prints were on it, so you can't ignore that. When you put them together, his prints would be on his gun and someone could have stolen it. Then we get to our conclusion that just because those two things are true, it doesn't mean that he killed Tim. Okay, that one's a little more convoluted to talk about. But again, they're both necessary to get us to 3, so we have them connecting. Okay, guys, so I will post the PDFs that we went through, the slideshows as PDFs, so that you can look through them as well. And anything that seemed really complicated, or I should spend more time, or I should come up with something to go through, or you still don't understand like how an argument is diagrammed, email me or post it on the classroom or post it on Blackboard, okay? We were supposed to have this quiz like, I don't know, like the last Friday, not this Friday. But I think I'm going to give people a little more time to do it, so I'm going to have the quiz be on Monday. So send me any questions or issues you're having with the identifying conclusions, identifying premises, and diagramming the arguments. I'm not going to have any that are super complicated. I may have an extra credit one that's pretty complicated, but you need to know how to identify each part, and are they connected? Do they need each other? Do they go right to the conclusion, or does it go one, therefore the other, therefore the last one? Okay. And I'll try and put up some more study materials or practice ones today for you to study with. All right, so send all that stuff to me today so that I can figure out if I need to go through anything tomorrow. Right. Thank you, guys.